talked about how change and progress had been made in the American political system. You may also be aware of a raft of sort of voter ID laws which are being passed in southern states, which make it harder for poor, typically African-American voters to vote because it requires them to get ID cards, which they typically don't have. Do you think this in some way represents an actual regression from perhaps a decade or 2 decades ago when those sorts of laws weren't in place?
I think that it represents regression 50 years ago. I think that the voter ID laws and other forms of new voter qualifications that now over 20 states have passed is the undermining of the Voting Rights Act. I was in the Supreme Court for the oral arguments where this sitting court took away Section 5. I think that while everyone is going to see Selma, that we are not honestly looking at the fact that there are those chipping away at the victory of Selma. And voter ID laws is one of them. We've led marches in Washington on voter ID. I was in the fight against voter ID when Eric Garner's family called me. I think it is an absolute attempt to undermine the King dream and what Dr. King fought for. Why voter ID? Now, those on the right say they're voter fraud. Well, look at the Justice Department figures. There's 0.0003% fraud. It is a solution looking for a problem. It is not a solution to a problem. The only thing they're doing is they're making it more difficult for people who disproportionately do not have government photo ID to vote. And they're basically a lot of minorities and young people. Example, in Texas, an ID of a student at a state university is not sufficient to vote, but a gun permit is. Go figure. Who do you think has gun permits and who do you think have student IDs? So I think that it is absolutely an impediment, which is why we've got to continue fighting these issues.